Welcome, closers, to the 200th episode
Really?
of Profitable Property Management.
ProfitCoach came in and said, we need to get much more sophisticated. We need to start looking at financial analytics around profitability, revenue per unit, churn, expenses as a percent of revenue to really dial in your financial model. But then what drives that? Well, it's your operational performance, right? But there's something upstream of that, which is what's going on in your property management business today.
Activity, operations.
It's today. And that's the real-time game scoreboard at your company today. What's being done right now? And is everything being done today successfully such that everybody can go home at the end of the day and know we did the job and everything flows from there? Our operational metrics, our financial metrics, and ultimately the bottom line of our business. And so in order to make this possible, what ProfitCoach is really championing in this industry is the whole category of data-driven process design.
Welcome, closers, to the 200th episode
Really?
of Profitable Property Management.
We nailed it.
The 200th episode is actually really special. I'm here in Austin, Texas with Danny Craig, and this is a special one. You flew all the way out here just to record this one. We have a lot of big stuff to talk about today, but let's just lead with the news. The big headline here is that you and I have a significant transition in our relationship after working together for...
We started working together in 2017. That's when we did the Port of Vallarta Mastermind.
That's right.
And things caught flame.
That's right. After 7 years, we now have a transition that is taking place. I am exiting the business. We have some new people coming into the business. We got a bunch of transition. Let's get right into it. But let's get into the story by rewinding and going back to 2017. What I recall is getting a message from you articulating that you were looking to verticalize.
That's right.
Tell me where you were at when you...
So we had this business called Bloom Accounting, and we had started the business, my brother, David, and myself, with this vision of using numbers to help boost the bottom line. I think the tagline was, we grow profits. And so we started this accounting business, and the goal was to kind of do some bookkeeping and then morph that into consulting. And two problems with that, like just because you can do bookkeeping doesn't necessarily mean that people will trust you to tell them how to run their business.
True.
And plus, we were working in 7 different industries, and it's kind of hard to be experts in 7 different industries at the same time. So we read The Pumpkin Plan by Mike Michalowicz, and we looked at our client base at that time and asked the question, like, where is our sweet spot in terms of our current client base? And at that time, we came up with the answer of SaaS. And that's the time that I reached out to you, and we started to go into understanding the whole concept of unit economics in a SaaS model. I don't know if you remember, but we did microconf together way back. That was spring of 2017.
The thought wasn't for you and I to work together at first. Even though we knew each other and we were friends, the thought was like, oh, hey, I'm in SaaS. I know the people in SaaS. And I was like, I'm going to this conference. You should come. You could speak there. You did end up speaking.
I applied for one of the stage presentations. I knew nothing about this industry, but here I was 2 months in on stage.
Which I love about you.
And I think I was talking about some Section 195 tax deduction for software companies. And so we did that. And I think we started to learn that there was like some synergy in collaborating in that environment.
Chris and I were there.
That's right.
At the time, because we'd already been to that event. We'd got some good stuff out of it. You came, and it was just good vibes, right? We had already known each other.
Yeah.
And then on the heels of that, we ended up, that was, the next step was the mastermind.
Well, it was a couple months after that. You're like, hey, why don't you actually consider doing this in property management? And
similar dynamics.
Yeah, similar dynamics. And you gave me a list of names to do some market discovery with. One of those names was Ben Sensenbaugh, which,
small world.
Need I say more? And then it was July of 2017, 2 weeks before I was supposed to have my first child. I've got 4 now, man. So this has been a long time. That I flew down to Puerto Vallarta, and you hosted the mastermind with Greg Crabtree.
Yeah, me and Alex hosted that.
Yeah.
It was at like this giant seven-story mansion. It was completely ridiculous.
It was really fun.
It was really fun, but I just remember showing up to that place and being like, this is kind of ridiculous.
Yeah.
Like this whole setup. And it was a ton of fun. And having Greg there was amazing. I had read his book. We'd both read his book. You actually referenced some of those concepts in the microconf talk. And then when we actually met with Greg, he added a ton of value to the room, opened up people's financials. I had never done it before. And the impetus for me was I was very familiar talking about with growth. It was somewhere along the way, I realized you could grow a big business and not make any money. And that was really disconcerting to me. That felt like criminal.
Yeah. Well, and so it was that night, as best as I can recall. And I remember Alex's partner was somewhere in the mix in this as well. Because Dennis, I think I did a little bit of some collaborating with him. But it was that night that I basically took Greg's model and layered on top of it unit economics. And because Greg was just there for the first day. And then the next day, we brought this model out, and me and Dennis started showing the Greg model with a unit economics component to it.
Yes.
And I don't know if you remember that, but it was like, we went from revenue to revenue per unit.
Yeah.
We went from profit to profit per door.
Took it down to the floor.
And the light bulb started going on.
Yeah.
And it was, I think at the end of that day that I said, Jordan, we have a BI platform that we're currently working with. And like, I can build a dashboard for this. And that was July. By August, I had started doing my first 5 sales calls. Some of those were to the people in that room, and all 5 of those calls resulted in a sale and a purchase of our beta coaching program.
So I think there's something to like learn here in approaching building a business. It wasn't like pure manifesting of saying like, I'm going to do this, it's going to work. It was like, could be.
Yeah.
Let's see.
Yeah.
Let's take a little approach, little bite. Oh, that worked.
Yeah.
Little bite. We stepped it up, but there was an inflection point. And the inflection point was after getting those initial coaching
You
clients,
came up with an insanely stupid idea.
That's one way to put it. And you decided to do it.
Yes. Well, and that's where we need to talk about Dave. Because
Yeah, exactly.
Dave is really the one who took the brunt of your audacious idea.
That's true.
Which
true.
was to do a national benchmarking study, the first of its kind for the PM industry. And what happened was after Puerto Vallarta, you messaged me and you said, hey, let's go meet in person. And that was one of the things I appreciate about you, by the way, is like you want to do significant things in person. Here we are today, right?
Yeah.
In person. And so you flew down to Denver. I don't know if you remember this.
We met at the airport.
We met at the airport and we started discussions of our first partnership.
Yes.
And it was somewhere tied to that conversation that the idea of this national benchmarking study came out. And Dave and I quite gullibly agreed to what turned out to be an absolutely phenomenal idea. But what happened is worth unpacking for a moment. So we went into this process of taking on 2 crazy endeavors. Part of that was standardizing financial data across the industry, across 50 different companies. That was our target. And honestly, it was surprisingly easy using your connections to get those 50 companies to sign up. It was amazing. But then we had the task of like actually sanitizing the data, standardizing the data. And that's where we came up with this concept of, well, we actually need like a standard kind of chart of accounts to map all of this to. So we started doing that, and we started having these long conversations with people about their P&L, and it was just, totally, we've never done this before, right? And then simultaneous to that, we had to figure out how to extract historical unit data from property management softwares. And that turned out to be
well nigh impossible
because like, that's not available in standard reporting. So
hopefully that like somebody is tuning in.
Yeah,
could do something about that somewhere.
Well, we fixed that problem. But anyways, the net of that was we started just digging in. And I remember we had conversations with, property management users, PM software users, with the softwares themselves. We were on support, like, where can we get this data point? Where can we get this data point? And what we ended up figuring out was that we could triangulate about 4 reports in AppFolio and Propertyware
to back into it.
And just a quick little aside, like, what we then realized was we had this mountain of a task in aggregating the data. And we tried to do it all in Excel, which we ultimately did. Dave was the brains behind this, but the data set got so massive.
I remember the spreadsheet's bogging down.
Oh, they kept breaking constantly.
It's too much data to load.
Too much data to process. You do one tiny little change to the formula and it's like 4 hours to update or something.
And there was actually some pressure here. This is a huge amount of work, but there was a specific deadline that kind of compounded the whole situation.
PM Grow in January of 2018.
So all of this effort cumulates and eventually happens with this PM Grow presentation. I remember being in the suite with you. I remember Dave was going to show up a day early. He had to come in a day late because he had been up for 24 hours straight working. Eventually, I'm in the suite with you guys, and it was this surreal, fragile, kind of sacred moment for me because the thing was just teetering. It was just teetering right there, right on the edge.
Well, the reality was, I don't even know if we should say this, but we're just going to say it because we're 7 years past this. But we showed up to the event and we had not done really a stitch of analysis. All we had really managed to do within a day or two before the event is just aggregate the data.
Yeah. See, what was going on for me was that is my disposition, but I hadn't worked with somebody else that was also comfortable doing that. And I remember my partner Chris showing up and conceptually being willing to help, but also realizing what you just said and kind of being what are you doing here? This isn't a good idea.
Yeah.
You guys were committed. And I remember you in particular, it was a good example. For me, it was the quintessential example of that belief, kind of semi-delusional component that is a necessary input for entrepreneurship. It's made up. You kept believing it was possible. And so we kept going. Had you stopped believing that, we would have stopped and it would have been it would have been a disaster.
Yeah, it was true of all 3 of us. Same goes for Dave. And so I remember we cranked out the first round of insights. By the time of the meet and greet the first night, we started running it by people. And then that night we said, well, we need to go make our PowerPoint presentation for the keynote address tomorrow at 9 a.m.
That's right.
So we went to work and at 4 a.m. we finished the presentation, caught a few hours of sleep. We were on stage at 9 a.m. and we released the first ever financial benchmarking study for the property management industry.
And you know what was amazing about that moment is that there was no expectation.
Yeah.
We had kind of said we were going to do this thing, but nobody was expecting anything. Yeah. That was truly a blank slate moment where we showed up and we released it. And I remember in the moment that it felt significant to me. Did you have that sense as well on stage?
I don't know that I felt significance. I felt a tremendous amount of fear. And here's why. We were getting on stage telling people that the industry really stunk. The average financial performance of
was quite poor.
Was 6%. You get into a room full of property management entrepreneurs and say,
enthusiasts,
you're losing, probably.
Yeah.
And so you're giving bad news. And then in the back of your mind, you're thinking,
is it accurate?
Is it accurate? And I remember getting off the stage and towards the end of the presentation, I had this thought come into my mind, which was, what about the formula in B24 and cell B24? And I go to the room and I didn't even want to open the Excel workbook to see if it was if we had made a mistake. And my brother was with me. He's like, no, open the computer, figure out if you made a mistake. And we looked and we hadn't.
Wow.
It was incredible.
Wow. Yeah. That was God's kindness to us in that moment, that things just went just right.
Yeah.
I mean, really, that's kind of how it felt like.
I still remember the verse that was going through my mind, which was, in you, Lord, I put my trust. Don't let me be ashamed. And that honestly stuck with me as an incredible moment and memory and significant event in my life that anchors my faith.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it felt very fragile. And I've said this to you and we've repeated this since then, but afterwards I just remember thinking like, that's about as close as I want to get to the line.
Yeah. So you were sitting, I remember exactly where you were sitting at PM Grow, and you're sitting somewhere in a hallway, and I walked over to you. I'm like, how are you feeling? And you're like, that was the closest I've ever come to a professional disaster.
It was uncomfortable.
Yeah.
It was uncomfortable. Certainly a faith building exercise, 100%.
Yeah.
So the point of all of this was to start the business by adding tremendous value. I had a little bit of model of this at a smaller scale, starting other businesses and leading with like content, basically. That would be kind of the cheaper way to put this. It was definitely more than that. And there was a team behind it. Yeah. In aggregate, what did we determine that this rolled out to? It was like 1,500 plus hours. It was
about 1,500 hours in the first study. Yeah.
Just unreasonable, right? I like that though. I like unreasonable. Yeah. If you go to somebody and say, hey.
We didn't get paid a dime.
Yeah. In general, if you say, hey, I have this really effective strategy, all it requires 1,500 hours doing something you don't really know how to do right now.
Never done before.
There's no compensation involved, but it's going to be amazing. It's not that novel of a thought, right? Anybody could do that, but it seems kind of ridiculous. Yeah. We pressed into it. There was a great reception. Okay, let's talk about the reception. The reception was positive and strong. There was a booth in the back. Immediately people come over. So how many?
I think we had 10 signups.
10 signups of new clients. So for being brand new, that felt really significant. But the other component of the reception, aside from lunch, there was like a lot of like, hey, great job, attaboy. Yeah. And then we got
sat down by Brad.
Yeah, and then we got more or less kind of a screed, an email of like, hey guys, good job. Also, you did it wrong. This is what you need to do. What was that insight from Brad that ended up actually being really helpful?
The insight was you guys need to do this at a national scale. And you need to have
all the way.
You need to go all the way and have this be stamped and really promoted by NARPM. And Brad was absolutely right. And
he facilitated.
Brad facilitated it. He put a proposal together, put ProfitCoach forward as the recommended vendor. And I'm just still forever grateful to the leadership at NARPM for getting behind it, seeing the opportunity and the possibility of what this could mean in terms of value creation for the members. And NARPM is really the one that made this possible. And specifically what they facilitated was the creation of a standardized chart of accounts for the industry, a standard roster of metrics, financial performance metrics for the industry, and then benchmarks, as well as some financial performance guidance around financial controls.
And the NAS specifically wasn't really within purview for us. It was a necessary step to get the report done, and most of the benchmarking work already was done. But that specific piece of like, this is a certification where people would just kind of implicitly say, I should reorganize my chart of accounts. Yeah. Material pain in the butt for people to do. That really happened because NARPM blessed off and promoted it.
100%. And I think that is what ended up allowing this financial performance conversation to really begin to take root in the industry. And what we began to see over the next several years was a major shift in conversation. And probably the quintessential essence of that shift is we went from talking about how many doors do you have to what is your profit per door? And the quality of business became a much more significant piece of the conversation.
Some things that were kind of fuzzy, some things that were already there for sure, right? It's a long time NARPM members. There's nothing new under the sun. However, things that were fuzzy came into a much sharper focus. Unit economics, great example. Revenue per unit. The fee maxing conversation, which even now, that conversation in abstract is just like making more money, useful, a lot more interesting when we frame that around RPU, the specific levers, by how much to impact what. That's what got way sharper for me.
Yeah. And so it was a broker owner of the NARPM Accounting Standards. And I still remember that dynamic. You and I were on stage doing the presentation. We had a booth in the back and we were handing out the booklets. And I was stuck talking to people by the stage. You're like, get over here to the booth. People want this stuff. And so that was a really exciting moment of seeing people really engage with the whole idea of the NAS conversion, which is converting their chart of accounts. And ProfitCoach has been a part of, I don't know, a couple hundred, 100 to 200 conversions over the years.
With hundreds more DIY.
And with hundreds more DIY. And that has given us the basis, and the vision was that in the future, we would have a much tighter data set to do another study. That would be a lot more clean, a lot more straightforward, and a lot broader than the first study.
And we actually got our chance to do that.
Yep.
Before we get there, some interim stuff of what happened afterwards. The original conceptualization of the business started off with coaching. And then it's evolved over time. It morphed into accounting, trust accounting in particular, corporate and trust being a meaningful component for a business. There's been how would you describe like the kind of evolution of what the business has been over time in terms of its offering?
Yeah, well, I think one of the things that worked well at the beginning was that we led with consulting from the outset.
Insight.
In our previous business, we had led with bookkeeping and then tried to layer on consulting. Well, it's a lot easier to sell it. You can do bookkeeping if people already know you know the numbers. So that was a good thing. Then we went to the whole idea of trying to expand, revenue per user on our end, revenue per client. And so that's why we went to this whole kind of full stack model. And what that looked like was over the next several years, and in many ways, we sort of really slowed down the growth of the coaching program in favor of just bringing on full stack clients who would hire us for both the consulting and the accounting piece of it. And so that was really the focus for the next, 2 to 3 years. And I think during that time period, as we ran both services side by side, we, were certainly able to create a lot of value on the accounting side of things, but we began to ask ourselves the question, I think this is really, beginning of 2021. What is it, now that we've been doing this in this industry for a number of years, what is it that we can be the best in the world at? And what is fundamentally shifting the dynamics of the business for our clients? Is it our ability to do bank recs, or is it our ability to help provide clarity on where people are today, help them envision the future they want, and map out the financial and operational game plan to get there? And we had to conclude it was that piece of consulting that was really driving the impact for our clients.
And yet that meandering path is a part of getting there.
Yes.
What I recall trust accounting was getting way deeper into the guts, like the real guts of the business. That also did inform some of the quality of the research that we did. Back on that research train, there was a couple year gap between the first study and the second study. And along the way, it was like, are we going to do another one? That's so important. A lot of people asking, so much demand. And of course, it's like, yeah, we'd like to, but like the last one was excruciating.
Yeah.
How would you quantify how much easier or harder the second one was in light of the infrastructure and the proliferation of the NARPM accounting standards that you described previously?
Well, the data extraction process was really the same in terms of the unit data. There were gains in terms of clarity on the financial data, but you know what? We still did a really thorough deep dive into the financial data to make sure that what's on the surface of the P&L is actually, true to form in terms of the underlying transactions. So I guess I would probably say that it was harder than we thought it would be again the second time around. But certainly the standardization helped and allowed us to really triple the size of the participant pool. Now, one thing I will add, Jordan, is that we actually included a significant number of participants in the 2022 study that had not converted to the NARPM Accounting Standards as a way of having a more holistic perspective of the impact of conversion and whatnot. So it was a mixed bag.
I think one thing I just want to highlight is that so much of what defines this is the difference between a study versus a survey. There is some semblance of what we're describing that actually wouldn't be that difficult to create via a survey. The effort that you're describing is entirely around sanitizing the data to be able to sign off and vouch and say firsthand, like, we've really looked at this. That's what was so much more difficult. What was the difference in what it actually produced, the data from roughly a 3 or 4 year gap?
Well, that was one of the exciting things about coming back to the study again was there was still that nagging question from the elevator. Did I make a mistake on this? And was 6% really true? Was that just representative of the 50 companies at that time? So that when we did this study in 2022, we actually rewound and got 3 years of data for the majority, about half of the companies. And so we were able to go back in time and analyze roughly, I think it was 2019, and our original data set was based on 2017. So we were able to go back in time and do our study on a data set that was very close to the original data set from a time perspective.
But with different companies.
But with different, some of the same and some different, right? And so, it's like, all right, we've got a new analysis machine, now we're using Tableau and, a larger set of companies. And we did the analysis. And guess what the average profitability was for property management companies in 2019?
6%.
6%. That was a glorious moment of validation.
Really confirmatory.
Yeah.
Really confirmatory. And I think part of the reason that was so important was because of the juxtaposition that it showed over time.
Yeah.
The juxtaposition over time felt so significant and so marked to me. It does beg a question like, is this true? Is this accurate? So that actually gave me even more comfort. So what was the gap in the delta that we saw over a really not that long of a period?
Yeah, I mean, the average profitability from 2019, and we can back all the way up to 2017, went from 6% in 2017, 6% again in 2019, all the way up to 11% in 2021. Average profitability for the top 25% of performers in the industry went from 25% in 2017 and 2019 all the way up to 32% in 2021. And if you use the data, basically, if you say, hey, we're just going to look at the same 70 companies that we had data for from 2019 all the way to 21, the average profitability went from like 25 to like 35%. So there's a significant shift there that occurred. And we saw that across profitability. We saw that across revenue per unit. Revenue per unit shifted from 238 in the original study to 317. Churn went from 12% down to 10%. Labor efficiency went from, on total labor efficiency on the company went from 2.2 up to 2.5. So everything shifted. And the conclusion is like, something happened in this industry. Obviously, there's market forces, but I truly do believe that
awareness,
attention, and attention on the part of these property managers made a huge difference.
I do too. And one of the things that we didn't talk about a ton, and I don't think I really even asked you until now, how did you think about sample set bias? I just kind of implicitly accepted in my head that in some way, the data we were looking at was representative of what was kind of orbiting around the cross-section of the industry. It's not as obvious to me that all 40,000 of the single-family residential property management professionals grew from in 5% profitability over that time. How did you think about that?
Yeah. I don't know that I have a great answer to that question. At the end of the day, what we know is that the people that are in the NARPM community at large are the people that were participating in this. That's where we see the shift. Whether that's true of the rest of the industry, I don't know. But you know what? Those aren't the people that I'm serving. It's this community. And this shift has been exciting to see.
Yeah, it's been incredible to see that kind of a macro, broad, across the board shift. There obviously are other components. There are so many different angles, so many different research projects. A lot of this for me was like intellectual curiosity and sating it and having the opportunity to do that via the business as a necessary vehicle. There are other dimensions though. Pricing was one of the things that we looked at in 2022. I told you the other day, my feeling was like that we haven't talked about that pricing study enough. What highlights came out of you via the work in that pricing study?
Yeah. So, I mean, our general process at ProfitCoach has been to just get further and further into the weeds. And so after consulting clients in this industry for 6 years, you start to form opinions around what are the real significant levers. And, at a high level, profitability, number one, right? And then below that is labor efficiency as the main driver of profitability. But if you want to add value and profitability to your bottom line as quickly as possible, it's clear to me that pricing is the most dynamic lever in the business. And that had formed as a conviction. And so in 2023, it's just last year, we said, all right, well, let's actually get into the weeds on pricing. And so we did a national pricing survey, which hasn't really been talked about at a very granular and sort of holistic level in this industry. And so we surveyed, I think we had, I don't know, about 100 different companies participate in that study, and basically surveyed them on the range of services that they offer and fees that they charge and their adoption rates on those various fees. And I think what came out of that was that there has been a lot of maturing in the industry around monetization strategies.
Absolutely.
But I think one of the things that where the work has yet to be done is really thinking thoughtfully, and we'll probably get into this in just a minute here, about the distinction between value creation and monetization.
Mm-hmm.
The term fee maxing has been, used widely in this industry. That is a monetization strategy. That's discrete from value creation. Both are important, but they need to run in parallel. And so I think where this industry is headed is there's probably a little bit of a gut check coming to the industry on, is our value creation strategy keeping up with our monetization strategy? Mm-hmm. Those two things have to be kept in parallel for there to be a healthy business and sustainable business dynamic.
You can only decouple so far.
Exactly. Yeah. And for so long.
And so the focus of the pricing study was around the structure and how the structure of pricing, different models, right? You got flat fee, you got all different kinds of models, and how that related to impacting bottom line profitability. What surprised you? And by the way, I think if I recall, the reason that this didn't get more airtime was that this was an exclusive for ProfitCoach clients. So of course, more people didn't see it. I think in retrospect, that was like a little frustrating for me because it's like, this is really great data.
Yeah. It was, honestly, Jordan, it wasn't meant to be so much analytical as it was meant to be a handbook for making pricing decisions. And so we use this regularly in our consulting, like, hey, let's look at your revenue per unit today relative to the benchmark. All right, I think the whole concept of revenue per unit aggressiveness is one of the concepts that came out really strongly out of the 2022 study. And which is basically measuring revenue per unit as a percent of average rent. And in certain average rent buckets, $750 to $1,000, $1,000 to $1,500, $1,500 to $2,000, how aggressive are you as it relates to your revenue per unit as a percentage of average rent?
And in simplistic terms, this is simply a way to eliminate all of the geographic market by market considerations.
Yeah. I can't charge X because I'm not in that market. Average rent generally normalizes that. And so we look in your bracket, how aggressive are you? Are you at 10% of average rent, 15%, 20%, 24%? And so once we have that conversation, then we can say, all right, you're at 15. The data shows that people in similar average rents can get to 20% in terms of total monetization. What are the levers that you can push and pull to get there? And the pricing study really unpacks all of the different top revenue streams that can be deployed as monetization strategies to get you there. We actually want to, if you're listening, give you access to some of that data for the first time. We've not, again, we've just kept the full meal deal internal, and that's still how we're keeping it because we owe some favors to our faithful clients. But we're going to give a version of this out to people listening. Go to pmprofitcoach.com/pricing report.
Yes, beautiful. So let's kind of bring the research piece to a close, and let's just talk a little bit more about the journey as entrepreneurs. This endeavor for me got kicked off when I was in a transition phase. Somewhere after maybe the first 5 or 6 years of running Lead Simple, it became obvious that it needed to be something different. It was a sales-focused CRM, and I could just feel in my bones that it wasn't going to take us where we wanted to go. We needed to transition into post-sale operations workflow. Honestly, I didn't even know exactly what it was. I just knew it was radically different than what it was right now. We were a bootstrap company and we had to rebuild the software. and not get paid along the way, which was brutal. That was like an 18 to 24 month rebuild. It was excruciating, and I'm not technical. And during that journey, I looked and figured out, okay, what else can we do that's going to add a lot of value, that's going to be impactful, that's going to still relate to what Lead Simple is doing and support it together. ProfitCoach ended up being one of those endeavors. Rent Scale, Tribe Mastermind, PM Grow, tried a bunch of different stuff. So when we got together initially, I was really clear that this was a way to add significant value for people that I already knew. I already understood what they were building, what they were trying to do. However, I'd never run a service business before, and I certainly didn't know anything about accounting. I learned some about accounting. I can't say that I am now. I don't feel like the third partner of an accounting firm that you would typically talk to and ask a bunch of questions to. That didn't quite happen along the way. My EQ did not get anywhere close to yours and Dave's. However, we did learn a lot. I grew so much as a result of this journey. I'd love to just riff on like the becoming piece of this 7 or 8 year journey together.
Honestly, that's where the meat and potatoes is.
Yeah,
that's where the substance is. For me, this started out with a conversation where at the outset, when we went into partnership together, you really wanted this to become something that would drive us to, dare I say, become and achieve more than we thought we could be. And you didn't use those words at that time, but I remember we set out that first revenue target and I'm like, why this number? And you're like, it's just a proxy for pushing us. Well done. You nailed it. And we did push ourselves. We knew that we had to up our game personally. All three of us enrolled in Strategic Coach. And it was in a couple of years that I looked back and I'm like, this isn't quite like going according to plan. So what's in this for me?
Yeah,
and
exactly.
I stepped back and I realized, you know what? There's something bigger going on here.
Yeah.
Meaning 1.0. And that's, I'm changing. I'm growing as a leader. I'm developing new habits. This business context is a framework in which I can become a different version of me. And so that was exciting, challenging, but gave me a sense of significance and purpose that was not strictly the financial and monetary outcomes. And I'm thankful for that. And I'm thankful for, I just want to say, this business and partnership with you has had a tremendous impact on my life. And I'm thankful for that.
I received that. Thank you.
So then I realized that, Dave and I, and you included, we've always sort of had this desire to actually like care for people. And that's sort of juxtaposed against the general perspective in entrepreneurship about people, which is like a necessary evil, right? And that undertone just comes up. And we started to lean into the whole concept of coaching. One of my mentors, Steve Riddell, is huge into coaching. And so like, how do you actually help people develop skill, and how do you develop a culture of competency versus just compliance in your business? And I realized that something cool was happening at ProfitCoach, and that was Meaning 2.0, and that is that other people were growing, other people were changing, and other people were becoming and achieving more than they thought possible. And so,
so let's pause on those two things. We went pretty quick past the initial disappointment.
Yeah,
I remember that disappointment being really heavy, and at some point it just hit me. It's like, if there's no money here, what is the point of this endeavor?
Yeah.
But I remember the opposite also being true. At the point where the meaning was the highest, I remember feeling like, wow, there's no money, but like this meaning is pretty significant.
Yeah.
That was a big shift for us. And then the team thing that you're describing, what's notable to me is I remember that following intention. The we becoming for the team, that didn't start happening until that was my intention. So it's not like for us, it was this observed thing of like, oh, wow, that's happening. Like it ramped in proportion to us committing to actually doing it.
And then on top of that, we had our experience with clients as well. And several years in, we started getting feedback like ProfitCoach changed my life. And, this is the best decision that I've made. And then you start going to trade shows and you meet people that you've never worked with before and who've never paid you a dime. And they're like, ProfitCoach has totally raised the bar of this industry. And I don't know if they're right or wrong, but the perception on the part of a lot of people is that this conversation that got started by NARPM being willing to put this initiative forward, and then, hopefully ProfitCoach has been a part of keeping that going in terms of our consulting services and content.
That it's driven an impact.
It's really driven an impact.
Yeah. That feels so good.
It does.
It feels so good all around. And it hasn't been without trial and travail. We got to Meaning 2.0. Finish it out.
I got my numbers off. Meaning 1.0 was financial outcomes. Meaning 2.0 was my personal growth.
Yes.
And Meaning 3.0 was sort of our final formalization of the mission at ProfitCoach, which is specifically to help people become and achieve more than they thought possible. And we shortened that into our acronym BAM, Become and Achieve More.
I remember looking at that mission and thinking, this is so beautiful because of how fragile it is. Have you ever seen a demotivational poster?
Yeah.
Okay. So you've seen motivational, demotivational. The subtext of the joke, it's making fun of motivational posters. And the point is, motivational posters are crap.
Yeah.
It's a joke.
They don't work.
It's insincere.
Yeah.
It's corporate BS. And I connect with that.
Yeah.
That makes sense to me. I think most missions, causes, purposes in most organizations are, what is it? Like if we were just going to be playful, what's going on? What are people typically doing if it's not this heartfelt thing?
It's a convenient way of trying to create more engagement. It's a means to an end, not the end itself.
Okay. Behavior modification.
Yeah.
We're going to get, we get people to do what we want by saying that, care for them is in the process. I mean,
but BAM is an end of itself.
Where the point is helping people become and achieve more than they thought possible.
Yeah, that's not totally divorced from business outcomes.
No, it's absolutely not. But the point is, that is the point. And the byproduct is material, tangible, business success, growth, bottom line impact. It's what is the primary thing and what is the symptom. The symptom in this case is the money rather than the symptom being the point is the money and like, hey, by the way, if some people could, benefit, that'd be great too. It's a really simple orientation, but it makes all the impact in the world.
Yeah, but it has major boots on the ground implications.
Very, very
in the middle of the day where, just yesterday, the outcome wasn't what I wanted. I'm like, okay, this is an opportunity. And I can either respond to this thread with frustration or sit back and say, you know what? Something good's going to come out of this. And I'm grateful for that. And, that's possible because God takes care of us in these things. We work our tails off and then we see significant results come as a result of working with people in a way that shows your care and empathy for them.
It's so cliche. How many times have you heard, if you chase money, it will elude you. If you chase fulfillment, you'll get both. I heard it 1,000 times. I don't know about you, but I'm the kind of person that learns best through having a 2x4 hit me on the side of the head. And I feel like doing things the other way created fertile ground for me to be open to receive this because I did not start this way.
And I like that word receive because it's not just something I do for my team. It's something my team does for me. And that's something I'm so grateful for. And I just want to say, I'm thankful for Dave. I'm thankful for the phenomenal third partner he's been for you and I, and just the way that his leaning into me has helped me. I'm thankful for everybody on our leadership team. Alicia there with the first study, Gregory who ran the second study, many respects, Janie, our director of accounting, Sadie, our chief of staff. All of those people have contributed back to my becoming and achieving more. And I'm thankful.
When people mirror that back, it makes such a big difference. That's been one of the biggest shifts with me with leadership is surrounding myself that are thinking the same way. It dramatically shifts my ability to hold it when I'm with someone that is flawed, screwing it up, struggling, but is aiming at the same thing, as opposed to someone that I'm not really sure if they're aiming or if they're open to this kind of other meta becoming conversation. Watching a leadership team grow and shift is one of the biggest gifts and rewards of the journey of entrepreneurship.
When you see people around your team walking around with the same Kool-Aid mustache, it is one of the most exhilarating things in business. And I gotta give my thanks to the entire Profit Coach team for that.
Absolutely. When you see it start bleeding past the confines of business, you start with this intent of like, this is going to be useful. And then you end up realizing it is going to be useful. But if it's really useful here, if it's the most impactful stuff, it's going to bleed out to other areas of life. And we've seen that happen. And that's like one of the biggest gifts that I didn't know was going to come. I thought I was going to get money. There has been money, but there's also been a profound amount of meaning. And I don't know, it's just like, it was unexpected that it would happen that late in my career because it's not how I started. It happened 7, 8, 9, 10 years into the career, maybe 10, probably 10 plus years in my career before I really got that. And I think that's part of like the long game here is being in something long enough to get past the initial hopes and expectations, come crashing down, to press past the smoking mess into something new. I feel like that's been a part of the transition we're about to talk about with me and you. We've pressed in long enough to open a second chapter of the journey.
That second chapter is really something we're extremely excited about. And I think one of the things that has become clarifying is as we've leaned into that question that I mentioned earlier, what is it that Profit Coach can be the best in the world at? That sort of feels like, you hear that whole concept of the hedgehog concept from Jim Collins. And it's like, really? Like, are you really going to be the best in the world? At something?
Yeah, I can feel a little self-aggrandized.
Yeah. And just like, come on. Like, can't we just, run a good business? But I'm here to tell you, Profit Coach is committed to being the best in the world at one very specific thing. And that is our ability in the property management industry to define the numbers that matter, measure those, benchmark those, and then distill best practices out of those that can help entrepreneurs in the industry develop highly profitable self-managing companies. I think we are the best in the world at that, but we're going to take it to the next level. And that's what season 2 of Profit Coach is all about.
So much of that best in the world is definitional, right? You got to define the right game.
Yeah.
If that had been the best in the world at
accounting.
Oh boy. Yeah, completely different. All of a sudden, like even as soon as you said that, it's like some despair. No, that's not going to happen. But what you just said, I believe it, man. I totally believe it. So let's talk more about the second chapter. Second chapter, let's start off with me and my transition in the second chapter. I mentioned that transitory state that I was in when we started this business. And since that point, Lead Simple has taken off. My role of CEO has gone from being kind of a formality of
well done, man.
Hey, thank you, brother. This made up title to now like 50, 60 people. It's like, okay, like this.
Yeah.
I got the full weight. I'm down in the squat position. The weight is on the rack and I'm under it and I feel it and it feels good and I'm grateful to be here, but it is commanding 110% of my time. So as we talked about season 2, one of the things for me was this business has been an honor and a pleasure to work and be a part of. This is not yet a mega 1,000-person business. The size of this business requires all of the equity holders, all of the founders to be engaged in the business. And I got to the point where my contribution was kind of waning, getting down and down and down. And I didn't want to be the guy that plays the technicality of like, well, technically I don't have to contribute. I could just hold on to the equity. That didn't feel good. That didn't feel right. And it just became obvious that we needed to talk about a transition for me out of the business. Of course, not an easy conversation to have, but we looked at it. We stared at the thing and so much life and possibility came out of it. And that's the first announcement is I am exiting Profit Coach as one of the original founders. And that is driven entirely by my need to focus entirely on the 40 plus hour seat I have as the CEO of Lead Simple.
Yeah. And what I appreciated about that, you made the call, I think it was like the day before Christmas or 2 days before Christmas.
And,
it's my gift.
Early.
And, like if you had been a horrible partner, I would have been like, boom, Merry Christmas to me. That isn't how I felt about it. But at the end of the day, what I appreciated was your orientation to where's the win-win here. And what that looks like is even more collaboration between our businesses.
Yes, exactly.
Going forward.
That's what made it much lighter.
Yeah.
It felt really heavy when it was like, hey, we can't talk anymore.
Yeah.
Like I gotta go.
Yeah.
That felt really heavy.
Yeah.
Once I got past it, once I like stared at the thing, I mean, sometimes you have basically my life experiences can be summarized as you have to be willing to risk the relationship in order to have it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And that's what happened here. And once we risked it and got it on the table, it was like, actually, there's a ton of possibilities.
Yeah.
And we're absolutely going to continue collaborating and working together.
Yeah. So end of the year, I think first couple of days of January, you flew down. I flew up to Denver, met with Dave and me, and we talked through what is the possibility, what are the possibilities going forward. And we're going to talk a little bit about what that looks like in terms of specific business functions. But I think one of the things that's important to loop into this is we also started and have been for some time thinking about what does the executive structure at ProfitCoach need to look like for season 2. And in my mind's eye, ever since the beginning of this company, I've always had in my mind that I'm the guy in the CEO seat for season 1. And I have expressed, I think, what that's meant to me in what we've talked about so far. But it's always been clear to me that there's going to be another guy that's going to be important for the executive team in season 2. We're going to need to expand the executive capacity at ProfitCoach in order to accomplish some of the crazy things. Expanding vision, which we're going to talk about in a second. And so it was actually something that I've been working on for probably, 4 years, honestly, to bring another CEO into ProfitCoach. And it's taken a long time because this is not something that I just want to wing. Like, this is important to the success of the mission at ProfitCoach. And so, we've been down different paths, and ultimately, I'm really thankful for the provision God brought me together with Brad Johnson, who's been the CEO at Sawyer Property Management, arguably one of the most successful property management companies by the numbers in the country. And
you would know.
And I would know. Yeah. There's 3 things that make Brad special as the new CEO at ProfitCoach on April 1st. No April Fool's joke here, okay? Number 1, Brad is 100% lockstep with our mission of BAM. And that is probably the most important thing it is by far the most important thing that we scrutinized and talked through. Tremendous alignment with Brad on that. Brad has significant executive leadership chops. He showed the ability to take Sawyer Property Management on a tremendous path of profitability increase over a short period of time, and really understands the property management industry and has really embedded himself in the network of this industry. And that really leads me to the third point, and that is that Brad lives and breathes property management. He's
an operator.
The inside of the industry. And Jordan, have you ever run a property management company?
I have not.
I've never run a property management company. Dave's never run a property management company. But season 2 of ProfitCoach is about getting into the operational weeds of property management like never before, because we have a vision that impacts not just the owners, but also the entire team at a property management company.
That's BAM.
That's BAM. It's not just about the owner's BAM. It's about the whole team's BAM. How can we create maximum value? If we can help the entire team of our clients become and achieve more than they thought possible, BAM goes the business. And so in order for us to make good on that, we need to have someone in the executive team at ProfitCoach who understands property management operations like nobody else. I don't want to say like nobody else, but at an in-depth level. The season of ProfitCoach analyzing property management from the outside,
from a distance,
but never having done it, is over. And that is something that we're excited about, because what we're doing at ProfitCoach is shifting me into the chief strategy officer seat for ProfitCoach. Brad's coming in as CEO. that's going to allow me to focus on what I do best, or one of the things that I do best, and that is strategy, analysis, and insight around how to develop highly profitable self-managing companies. And Brad is going to help lead the organization through the ventures of season 2, which is, I think, what we want to talk about.
This really is the final frontier. My obsession has been getting as close to the metal as possible. Yeah. And what you just highlighted is really material. I started off doing lead generation, and it's like, well, where do the leads go into a CRM? Well, when we build a CRM, well, how do you get more leads? Let's talk about marketing. Well, what if you could market and not make any money? Let's talk about finance, getting closer and closer and closer. The reality is I haven't run a property management company. I have no intentions of running a property management company anytime soon. For what ProfitCoach is aiming at, for this specific mission, this felt like the final frontier. And I remember all along the way bumping into some of that feedback of like, I don't know about you, but do you recall like the feedback about trust accounting initially? What do you know about that? And the answer is like, nothing. Give me a couple of years.
6 months.
Yeah, they just bang my head against that repeatedly and we'll figure it out. So we did that. So we figured out trust accounting. Haven't run a property management company, figured out how to do trust accounting at a high level. Haven't run a property management company, figured out how to understand the details in the most comprehensive level possible. And yet the next burgeoning, expanding phase of the mission, it called for this. I'm so glad to be crossing this frontier and to watch you guys stepping into this. Tell me more about that expanding vision that necessitated this move.
Yeah, well, as I mentioned, the question that we've been focusing on for the last couple of years is, again, what can we be best in the world at? And we've distilled that as our ability to define what the numbers that matter, measure, benchmark, and distill best practices out of those. And that's us, but we're taking that model of insight generation, best practice generation to the next level, and that is operations. And so as we look into the future and we think about what does it look like to take a data-driven approach to the operations of the business, in the same way that we've done that with the financials of the business, there are a ton of things that open up when we start bringing that framework to the operational level. Here's what that looks like. That looks like standard metric definitions for operations across the industry, across your leasing process, renewal process, across your move-in, move-outs, all of the fundamental mechanics of a property management business, including maintenance.
Juicy.
And then it's not just metric definitions. That's not that hard to do, right? Like, okay, here's the number. Benchmarks. What is standardized performance and what does top tier performance look like for those numbers? Because honestly, that's what drives change. It's not just knowing that there's a number out there, but how do I relate to what the best people are doing? That's gamification. And honestly, that gamification was one of the huge things that I think spurred this industry on. It was the target. Like, I want to be Ben.
Yeah.
So
give me something to aim at.
Give me something to aim at. Here's the trouble. And this is where the synergy between ProfitCoach and Lead Simple comes in. That data is extremely difficult to get out of a property accounting software at any sort of consistent or standardized level, because process data isn't what those accounting softwares are designed to create.
They're designed for accounting.
They're designed for accounting. And so what you need is the ability to track your historical work in terms of the processes that you've executed over time, measure those against each other, and then measure your company against other companies. And Lead Simple as a framework of workflow automation and process management opens up that world. And just last week, now ProfitCoach is on the integrations page with Lead Simple, because what we found a way to do is take the data inside of Lead Simple and actually turn that into real-time performance data, not just for property management business owners, but for their teams. Now, to understand the significance of that, I have to tell you about the hierarchy of insight, okay? The hierarchy of insight is something that's incredibly important to the success of your property management team. And if you don't know about it, then you're probably not going to manage your team very well, okay? The hierarchy of insight is that there's a progression of value of insight. And you want to move, you got to get the baseline covered, and sort of you got to, work up the chain. most business owners start with a very baseline understanding of their business performance, and that's their bank balance. Okay. They log into Chase. They have money in the bank. It's a good day. They don't have money in the bank. It's a bad day. All right. ProfitCoach came in and said, we need to get much more sophisticated. We need to start looking at financial analytics around profitability, revenue per unit, churn, customer acquisition cost, expenses as a percent of revenue to really dial in your financial model. All right. But then what drives that? Well, it's your operational performance, right? Days on market has an impact on churn. Your ability to execute the services really drives your financial performance and ultimately the bottom line in the bank account. But there's something upstream of that, which is what's going on in your property management business today.
Activity, operations.
It's today. And that's the real-time analysis or the real-time reporting on the game scoreboard at your company today. What's being done right now? And is everything being done today successfully such that everybody can go home at the end of the day and know we did the job, and everything flows from there. Our operational metrics, our financial metrics, and ultimately the bottom line of our business. And so in order to make this possible, what ProfitCoach is really championing in this industry is the whole category of data-driven process design. Data-driven process design.
Yes.
You like that?
Yeah.
Data-driven process design. And what we go from is Sue does property management this way, Bob does property management this way. And we just hope it's a good way for your local market to now an analytical perspective on what does two things. What creates value for the owners and residents that you're serving? And we can now start to measure what are the key value milestones in a process for owners and residents? What are the key SLAs, the important service level agreements, the timeframes around those milestones? And then the resulting experience of each of those value deliveries. And then once we know that, we can begin to amplify that, generate reputation off of that, and do more of those things that are actually creating value for the owners and residents. So that's about expanding the value creation pie. Monetization can then come in and gobble that pie up, and up goes revenue per unit. Does that make sense?
This is season 2.
This is season 2.
This is why the game had to get even further upped and elevated.
And what data-driven process design allows you to do is two things from a value creation perspective. Now you can move to data-driven value creation, where you're actually measuring the value creation output of your company, and you can amplify that. And then you can start moving to data-driven pricing design as a monetization strategy around that value creation. Okay? So that's the value creation side of it. You excited so far?
This is really intensely gratifying.
Okay.
Just to see the progression of us just continuing to press into it. This was the next step.
Yeah.
This was like just descending one step lower.
Yeah. Then the other direction that data-driven process design points is internally to your team. Now, this isn't just about giving the business owners a whip so that they can extract the most value and value or execution out of their team. This is about defining what is possible in terms of performance and what the team needs to do in their business every day to win.
What winning looks like.
What winning looks like.
Who doesn't want to know that?
Exactly.
And how many folks are confused?
Exactly.
They're not quite sure.
Yeah. You walk into the office at the beginning of the day, you have 100 tasks, but are all of those equally important? And when Bob calls and says he's got a leak in the house and your day explodes because you're a property manager and you have to take care of Bob and make sure the house doesn't flood, are you able to get back into the flow of work and actually know, boom, before I leave the office today at 5 p.m. and have to go pick up my daughter from school, I have to get these can I go home yet metrics down to 0 because these are the glass balls that we can't drop. And if I can't get it all done, at least I have clarity on what needs to be done and I can bring the team in to make sure everything's done so I can go home and win.
The ambiguity that exists in so many businesses right now doesn't serve anybody.
Yeah.
Nobody is benefiting from that. There really isn't a counter perspective. There's not like the other guys that are like, no, this should be complete chaos. It's just been a matter of how. How exactly do we do this? And in many cases, the innovation or the idea, like this idea, I could have had this idea 10 years ago. And what would we have done about it? The technology, the situation, the awareness,
Right.
the industry, it needed to mature.
Yes.
To now is the time. Like, this is the moment to press into this.
Yeah. And so on the internal side, what opens up is clarity on what success looks like. Now you have clarity on what actual performance looks like in terms of efficiency and execution and what a job well done looks like. And that opens up possibilities around internal gamification. You can start to develop best practice communities for specific roles, because now we have a standard of what leasing success looks like or what maintenance success looks like. And once we know what the success looks like, everybody wants to know what the successful people are doing. And thus you get the best practices that emanate out of that data. You can just start to develop more. One of the hardest things to do in this industry is performance-based compensation. Extremely complicated. But with this kind of data, and with these kinds of thresholds and benchmarks and targets,
Clear, explicit, clean.
Expectations and opportunity. And then one of the most exciting things is you get to actually fundamentally differentiate your business from the competition, because there's a standard and you know where you stand with regard to it.
I didn't think when we started this business that it was going to descend this low into the guts of what we're talking about. What I see is that early on, the conversation we were having was exclusively with the owner. It was satisfying, educational, impactful. Somewhere along the way, it became really obvious to us that we were leaving out the team out of the conversation. Hundreds and hundreds of conversations you and I have. I'm guilty of this. This is reflected in my network. My network, if you want me to like get in touch with some really smart operators, easy. Frontline folks, I'm way more disconnected. Along the way, actually, ProfitCoach started a mastermind specifically for integrators. And that was the beginning of I think, seeing that these folks that are boots on the ground, having them be aware of the conversation is just as, if not more impactful than having the owner butt in. I've had the experience so many times where I got an owner absolutely jacked and excited about possibility and a vision. And then they go home and they talk to their team and something happens.
Yeah.
Whatever it is not the playing out of the vision that we had discussed.
Boss, you don't understand what's going on in my world.
Yeah. Yeah, great. You went to the conference and you have another idea and you didn't consult me and now you're mandating I do this. Awesome.
Exactly. I think the reason the team is important is really back to the mission of helping people become and achieve more than they thought possible. And I think that there is a really important shift that has yet to occur in this industry. And that is sort of the generally accepted belief that property management is a stinky place to work.
Which people don't necessarily know. Nobody says it on stage. Nobody says it didactically. But there is a subtext that somehow this is kind of like a second tier place. Here's where it shows up for me when talking about labor and profile hiring. When I communicate what we're doing internally for who we're trying to hire, for the standards that we hold, for the rigor that we apply in hiring, a lot of the pushback I get is like, well, that's great for you, but
software company.
Yeah, but we can't have great talent. Like we've got to kind of settle for somebody that would be willing to work at a residential property management company
and get screamed at all day.
And that is true if that is your belief system.
Yeah.
I do believe that if that's how you're thinking about it, you're more than likely going to see that show up. But I can't see any reason with having been in this space for 10 plus years, I cannot see any fundamental reason why that has to be true. This conversation we're having helped me connect the dots between that possibility and how this actually effectuates change in that perspective and mindset.
I think what's required is a shift in belief around whether or not a property management company can be the context where your team members can actually become and achieve more than they thought possible. And I think a great example of this is the world of global talent that has emerged in this industry. And people originally hired people from other countries, to enter invoices and do very data-oriented tasks. But slowly people have realized these are human beings and they actually have talents and abilities made in the image of God and they can do cool stuff. And oh my goodness, we can actually bring in someone from Nicaragua and he can be an owner-facing account executive. Yeah, that's possible. And do you think those people are excited about their opportunity in property management?
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Life-changing.
And that's because a world of possibility has opened up. And I think that's the world of possibility if we can open up that world by defining what it means to win every day, to actually succeed,
Yes.
even in the midst of the chaos
Yes.
every day. And if we can do that and people can realize that, then I think this industry can move from not a great place to work, something you have to settle for, to a premier workplace environment.
I think that this is the perfect example. Global versus stateside is the perfect axiom. And here's why. When people say that, I don't know if I can have that global person do such and such, what they're really saying is, I don't know how anybody does that job at a degree of specificity that I could have clear and oversight. Mm-hmm. If you had oversight, if it was clear what the tasks were, what the timeline, the expectations, and you were just looking at the minutia, global, stateside, it matters way less. If you don't have any of that and you just need a proxy for trust, then having them 5 feet from you is like a decent proxy for trust. But it is dramatically inferior than having what people actually want, which is visibility into what is actually happening.
Yeah. And if you can provide that visibility, what opens up is a world in which you can actually start to bifurcate the roles a lot more. And segmentation. And then you can get people in their sweet spots. And then as you get people in their sweet spots in the realm of their unique ability, again, bam, opens up.
So team, that's the headline bumper sticker here. Team matters. The people around you, the people that are supporting and making the journey happen. And I know for me, like there's a lot of people. I think like right now is a great moment to just like shout out some of the other people. We already talked about the teams at Lead Simple and ProfitCoach. We mentioned Brad Larson. We mentioned Dave. Who else comes to mind as just gratitude for all the people that have helped us have an amazing season 1 and the people we will continue to work with and have relationships as we head into season 2.
I'm thinking of the people that at NARPM that were willing to embrace this concept and promote it and take it to the industry, really.
2018 board.
Gail Phillips. Gail, thank you. For all that you've done to actually make this possible. And
she trusted us.
She trusted us. Yeah. I think of the people on the first committee. I don't remember all their names, but I think Mike Nelson was one of them. Marco Montez. There's other people that were significant in contributing to the project. And then really, I want to just thank our ProfitCoach client base, and specifically first 4 people who signed up.
The day ones.
Yeah, the day ones. Ben Sensenbaugh, tremendous give and take relationship there. Yeah. I show up on coaching calls with Ben and I'm like, there's a massive value exchange going here and it's not just the money he's paying me. That was huge. Steve Welty, has someone who's really personified the heart behind property management for a long time, and the whole heart for people, value creation.
He was the guy that I remember blowing my mind, telling me that he wrote an annual letter from the heart to his owners. Yeah, and he phrased it that way. Yeah, he was like open and unabashed about it. Yeah, absolutely.
Stephanie Gordon,
God rest her soul.
Just blessing to work with. Just a wonderful person. And then as we think about some of those initial clients, Matt Leshper also comes to mind, 1836.
Who's out doing cool stuff with tech.
Just emailed me this week and said, we're in this together. I'm with you. 6 years later.
Yeah.
Thank you, Matt.
Yeah. Matt's somebody who hasn't gotten bored. He's somebody who's continued to innovate. He's a real tinkerer in the space.
I think one person that really was just a blessing to work with and someone that really has done a lot to advance this conversation also is Matthew Tringali with Better Who. Matthew, thank you.
He's been a champion for the work.
Yeah.
The work, the thought leadership, RPU, he's really seen that and run with that and looked at
labor efficiency. Honestly, Matthew
he's beat that drum a million times.
Todd.
Absolutely.
Revenue per unit?
Yes, absolutely. His focus on that, focus on fee maxing, the first guy that actually came out with a high quality course on it in the space. He's definitely contributed to that conversation. I think about Shirley Johnson.
Shirley is special because she's sort of an archetype of the fundamental transformation that comes with intention around financial performance.
Yes.
And the sort of ability to defy the odds around what's possible in financial performance and really achieve some fantastic outcomes in terms of building a highly profitable self-managing company.
Shirley was the person that on our very first call told us that she wanted to triple the size of her business in order to triple her profits.
And build a maintenance division.
And we were so delighted to communicate this idea that you could actually keep your business the same size and triple the profit.
Exactly. Yeah. Quadruple, quintuple. Yeah.
She is the quintessential person who works with a coach, looks for a coach, follows the game plan, and has reaped amazing benefits. Watching her journey has been incredible. Everybody in the $1 Million Club, really. What is the $1 Million Club?
This is the mastermind of companies that have achieved at least $500,000 in annual profit, and in many cases have gone beyond $1 million in annual profit.
And the group and that vibe has been awesome. I've loved participating, being in those conversations, seeing people transition and grow, seeing the becoming for them, right? To be in the $1 Million Club, your money situation is already, it's pretty decent. And then those questions of like, what's next? Being able to be in there in that conversation with those group has been really satisfying to me. Trips.
And part of my growth experience to
100%.
To grow and learn with and from these entrepreneurs.
It's a very different kind of coaching conversation. Chris, my business partner at Lead Simple, I have a lot of gratitude for him.
Yeah.
When we first did this together, it was actually a Lead Simple venture. It was a Lead Simple venturing with you and Dave together. Eventually, I took over that interest, but Chris was a part of the permission and the bless off of like, this is good.
Yeah.
There's something here. Don't know what it's going to be, but he supported me with having my piece of the vision as well. And I've been working with him for 15 years now. The reality is we're not going to be able to name all the names. There are so many people that supported us. And in many ways, we don't even know what it is. Like somebody endorsing the work, passing it on, giving a thumbs up.
Yeah.
Man, it means a lot,
And these are all blessings from God. I'm thankful. I just want to say it again. So thankful for you and Dave. Couldn't have asked for better partners for season 1.
Yeah, man, it's been a lot of fun. So as we are in this very moment, we are actually effectuating the change between season 1 to season 2. And this is a first for me, but we're going to do it live right here. We are actually taking the sale agreement and in real time, I am signing my signature down here to close out season 1 to make way for season 2.
Thank you.
And so it goes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Appreciate you, brother. You too. You should have had Dave here.
Yeah.
I thought about that halfway through.
Well, there we go. People are getting to watch us work and do the thing. And yeah, this is beautiful.
Couldn't have been more high touch.
Thank you all for being with us and for being on the journey. Appreciate you guys.
Yeah.
As always, stand strong. Until next time.
That's it for this episode. Hope you enjoyed it. You can check out other episodes along the way. If you're watching this on YouTube, appreciate a subscribe. Any comments, I'm always here to engage. If you're listening on an audio platform, would really appreciate a review. It's a great way to help other people find out about the show.